Before we ever learned math, language, or manners, we learned something far more powerful and far more dangerous. We learned how to stay loved, not how to be ourselves, how to stay connected. For a child, connection is survival. Love is not a luxury, it is oxygen. Without it, the nervous system goes into alarm, the body into stress, the heart into fear. So when a child senses, even subtly, that certain emotions threaten connection, that child will instinctively choose attachment over authenticity every single time. Imagine a small child who is naturally sensitive, expressive, full of big feelings. They cry loudly, laugh wildly, ask endless questions. But the environment they grow up in may not have room for all of that. Maybe the adults are overwhelmed, stressed, emotionally unavailable, or carrying their own unhealed pain. The child quickly reads the room. Children are emotional geniuses at this. They notice that tears make a parent tense, anger brings disapproval, fear gets dismissed, needs feel like a burden. And without anyone sitting them down and explaining it, they come to a quiet, life-altering conclusion. The real me is too much, and if I'm too much, I might lose love. That is the moment the split begins. From then on, the child starts editing themselves, not consciously, not manipulatively, but instinctively. They swallow their tears and force a smile. They stop saying I'm scared and start saying I'm fine. They become easy, helpful, low maintenance, or maybe they become exceptional, high achievers, perfectionists, little adults far too early. They sense that being impressive brings praise, and praise feels like safety. So they shine, perform, succeed, while their true feelings wait quietly in the background, unexpressed and unacknowledged. This is not weakness, this is brilliance. It is the intelligence of a young nervous system doing whatever it must to preserve connection. But there is a cost. Every time a child ignores their inner truth to protect a relationship, they move a little further away from themselves. Their anger, which was meant to protect boundaries, gets labeled as bad. Their sadness, which was meant to seek comfort, gets hidden. Their fear, which was meant to ask for reassurance, gets buried. Over time, they don't just hide these emotions from others, they lose access to them within themselves. They grow up praised for being so mature, so strong, so independent. No one sees that this strength was built on self-abandonment. No one sees that independence was learned because depending on others felt unsafe. And the child, now an adult, doesn't see it either. It just feels normal to ignore their own needs. It feels natural to say yes when they are exhausted, to overgive in relationships, to feel guilty for resting, to feel anxious when someone is upset with them. They call it responsibility, loyalty, love. But underneath, it is the old survival pattern still running the show. If I disappoint people, I might lose connection. If I show my real feelings, I might be rejected. So they become experts at reading others and strangers to themselves. They can sense a shift in someone's tone in seconds, but can't answer the question, what are you feeling right now? They take care of everyone else's emotional world, while their own inner world feels foggy, distant, hard to reach. And because this pattern often leads to external success, good careers, stable relationships, admiration, it rarely gets questioned. The world rewards self-abandonment when it looks like productivity and kindness. But the body knows. The body carries the tension of all the swallowed no's, all the uncried tears, all the unspoken truths. It tightens, braces, stays on alert. Over years, that chronic disconnection can show up as anxiety that never fully settles, fatigue that sleep doesn't fix, a sense of emptiness even in the middle of achievement. Not because the person is ungrateful or broken, but because a part of them has been left behind, the part that once knew exactly what they felt, needed, and wanted. To understand this is not to blame parents or the past. Most caregivers did the best they could with the emotional tools they had. They too likely learned to abandon themselves for love. This pattern travels through generations silently, not through cruelty, but through unawareness. And awareness is where the cycle can finally shift. When an adult begins to notice, I always put myself last, or I don't know what I feel, or I'm terrified of disappointing people, that is not failure. That is the beginning of reconnection. It is the moment the adult self can gently turn toward the younger self who made that survival choice long ago and silently say, Thank you for protecting me. You did what you had to do. But we're safe enough now to start being real. And that is where true healing begins. Not in becoming someone new, but in slowly, patiently, compassionately returning to the person you had to leave behind in order to be loved. As the years pass, the child who once reshaped themselves to stay connected does not simply grow up. They grow into a role. What began as a temporary adjustment slowly hardens into an identity. The flexible, curious, emotionally alive child becomes the responsible one, the strong one, the peacemaker, the star, or the invisible one. These roles are not chosen from freedom. They are crafted from necessity. They are costumes stitched together from expectation, fear, and the deep human need to belong. At first, these roles feel useful. The strong one is praised for not complaining. The helpful one is appreciated for always being there. The achiever is admired for success. The quiet one is called easy and well-behaved. Each compliment reinforces the message, this version of you is acceptable, this version is safe, this version will be loved. And so the role tightens layer by layer until it no longer feels like something you do, but something you are. But every role, no matter how polished, is still a mask. And masks are worn at a cost. Take the one who becomes the strong one. From the outside, they look unshakable. Others lean on them, trust them, depend on them. But inside, they may feel alone, unsupported, even resentful. They learned early that showing vulnerability led to discomfort in others or was simply ignored. So they carry pain silently. They become the pillar for everyone else while secretly wishing someone would notice they are tired too. Strength becomes their prison. They don't know how to ask for help because their identity is built on not needing any, or consider the one who becomes the pleaser. They can sense what others want before a word is spoken. They adjust, soften, agree, accommodate. Conflict feels terrifying because disagreement once threatened connection. So they smooth every edge, swallow every objection, and call it kindness. But over time, they lose clarity about their own preferences. When asked, what do you want? They freeze. Desire feels selfish. Saying no feels dangerous. Their life fills with obligations chosen not from joy, but from fear of disapproval. Then there is the achiever. Their worth becomes tied to performance. Grades, awards, promotions, recognition. Each success brings a brief moment of relief, a fleeting sense of being enough, but it never lasts. The bar keeps moving. Rest feels like laziness. Failure feels like personal collapse. Underneath the ambition is often a quiet belief formed long ago. If I am exceptional, I will be secure. If I slow down, I might lose love. So they run on an endless treadmill, applauded by the world while disconnected from their own exhaustion. Some take on the role of invisibility. They learned that having needs created stress, so they made themselves small, undemanding, easy to overlook. They don't ask for much, don't express strong opinions, don't take up space. They pride themselves on being low maintenance. But inside, there can be a deep ache to be seen, known, chosen, an ache they hardly allow themselves to feel. They disappear in relationships, then wonder why they feel lonely even when surrounded by people. What all these roles share is this: they are strategies for maintaining attachment, not expressions of the full self. They highlight certain traits while burying others. The strong one buries vulnerability. The pleaser buries anger. The achiever buries rest and play. The invisible one buries desire and voice. Over time, the buried parts do not vanish. They go underground. They show up as unexplained sadness, sudden bursts of anger, anxiety without a clear cause, or a numbness that makes life feel flat. The tragedy is that these roles are often celebrated. Society rewards overwork, self-sacrifice, emotional suppression, and constant agreeableness. So the person gets external validation for the very patterns that are disconnecting them from themselves. They may build a life that looks successful from the outside, career, family, responsibilities handled, yet feel a quiet emptiness they cannot explain. They may think, I have everything I'm supposed to want. Why don't I feel fulfilled? The answer is not that they are ungrateful. It is that the life was built around a role, not around the truth of who they are. Breaking out of a role can feel terrifying at first. If you've been the strong one for decades, admitting you are struggling can feel like identity collapse. If you have been the pleaser, saying no can trigger intense guilt and fear. The nervous system reacts as if connection itself is at risk because once long, ego, it truly was. That is why change requires gentleness. These roles were not mistakes, they were protections. But as an adult, you have more resources, more awareness, and more choice than you did as a child. You can begin slowly to experiment with letting the mask loosen. The strong one can share a small truth about how they feel. The pleaser can decline one request without over-explaining. The achiever can rest without earning it. The invisible one can voice a preference, even if their voice shakes. Each small act sends a new message to the nervous system. I can be real and still be connected. Over time, the role stops being a cage and becomes just one part of a much larger, richer self. Strength can exist alongside tenderness. Kindness can exist alongside boundaries. Ambition can exist alongside rest. Quietness can exist alongside a clear voice. The goal is not to destroy the roles, but to outgrow their limits, to become a person who is no longer defined by who they had to be to survive, but free to discover who they truly are when survival is no longer the only priority. Long before the mind finds words for pain, the body has already recorded it. Every flinch that was hidden, every tear that was swallowed, every surge of fear that had nowhere to go, leaves a subtle imprint in the nervous system. We like to believe that if we don't think about something, if we push it aside and stay busy, it fades. But the body does not operate on denial. It operates on experience. And experience, especially emotional experience, is stored not just as memory, but as sensation, posture, tension, and chemistry. When a child feels scared but cannot run, fight, or be comforted, the energy of that fear does not simply disappear. It gets held. Muscles tighten. Breathing becomes shallow. Stress hormones surge through the bloodstream, preparing the body for danger that never fully resolves. If this happens once and safety returns, the system resets. But when it happens repeatedly, when a child lives in constant emotional uncertainty, pressure, or invisibility, the stress response can become the baseline. The body learns to stay ready even when there is no immediate threat. Years later, that child may be an adult sitting in a quiet room, yet their shoulders are raised, jaw clenched, stomach tight. They may not consciously feel afraid, but their body is braced as if something bad could happen at any moment. This is not imagination. It is the nervous system doing what it learned to do long ago. Stay alert, stay guarded, don't relax too much. Safety feels unfamiliar. Calm can even feel uncomfortable because the body equates tension with preparedness. Emotions that were never expressed often resurface not as clear feelings, but as physical signals. Unspoken anger may live as chronic headaches, neck pain, or a sense of internal pressure. Buried grief can show up as heaviness in the chest, persistent fatigue, or a lump in the throat that appears without obvious reason. Anxiety may not start as a thought. It may begin as a racing heart, sweaty palms, or a churning stomach. The mind then scrambles to explain the sensation, creating worries to match what the body is already feeling. This is why simply telling someone to think positive or calm down rarely works. You cannot reason your way out of a state that lives in the tissues, the breath, and the nervous system. The body needs to feel safety, not just understand it intellectually. And safety is not created by forcing feelings away, but by allowing them to move through in a way that was not possible before. Consider how often people override their body's signals. They are exhausted but push through with caffeine and willpower. They feel a knot in their stomach before a commitment, but ignore it and say yes anyway. They feel sadness rising, but distract themselves with screens, food, or work. Each time the message to the body is the same: your signals are inconvenient, be quiet. Over time, the signals either grow louder or go numb. Louder can look like panic attacks, chronic pain, digestive issues, or sudden emotional overwhelm. Numb can look like feeling disconnected, flat, unable to access joy or even sadness. The body is not trying to sabotage you. It is trying to protect you and, eventually, to be heard. Symptoms are not enemies, they are messengers. Pain says, something inside needs attention. Anxiety says, system is overwhelmed or feels unsafe. Fatigue says, you have been carrying too much for too long. When we treat these signals as problems to silence rather than communications to understand, we miss the deeper invitation to reconnect with the parts of ourselves we had to suppress. There is also a profound link between emotional suppression and the immune system. Living in a constant state of internal tension and self-denial keeps stress hormones elevated. Over time, this can disrupt sleep, digestion, and the body's natural ability to repair and regulate itself. It is not that emotions directly cause illness in a simple way, but that chronic disconnection from one's inner world creates physiological strain. The body pays the price for the emotional labor of pretending everything is fine. Healing begins when we turn toward the body with curiosity instead of control. Instead of asking, how do I get rid of this feeling? We begin asking, what is my body trying to tell me? We notice the tight chest and gently explore what emotion might be there. We feel the lump in the throat and allow tears that were once unsafe to fall. We sense the clenched jaw and ask where in life we are holding back words that need to be spoken. This is not indulgence, it is integration. It is giving the body the completion it never had. Simple acts can begin to rebuild trust between mind and body. Slower breathing that signals safety to the nervous system. Movement that releases stored tension. Quiet moments of checking in with sensations without immediately judging or fixing them. As awareness grows, the body often softens. Muscles release. Breath deepens. Emotions become clearer and less overwhelming because they are finally allowed to flow rather than being trapped. The body has been loyal through everything. It carried you through experiences your mind could not fully process. It adapted, braced, endured. When you begin to listen, truly listen, you are not just reducing symptoms. You are restoring a relationship with the most honest part of you, the part that never stopped telling the truth, even when you had to stop hearing it. For many people, the quiet belief that follows them through life is this: there must be something wrong with me. It hides beneath perfectionism, anxiety, people-pleasing, overworking, or emotional shutdown. They look at their struggles and assume they are defective, weak, or somehow less capable than others. But what if the truth is not that you are broken, but that you adapted brilliantly to circumstances that once overwhelmed your young system? When a child grows up in an environment where emotional needs are not consistently met, the child does not have the luxury of saying, this situation is unhealthy. A child's brain is wired for attachment, not analysis. If something feels painful or confusing, the child is far more likely to conclude, I am the problem, than to risk believing the caregivers are unable to provide what is needed. This belief protects the attachment bond. If I am the problem, then maybe I can change and keep love. If they cannot meet my needs, that feels terrifying and unsafe. So the child turns confusion inward and begins adjusting themselves. Those adjustments are what later get labeled as personality traits or flaws. Hyperindependence may develop in a child who learned that relying on others led to disappointment. Emotional numbness may form in someone who discovered that feelings were ignored or ridiculed. Constant achievement may grow in a child who sensed that praise came mainly with performance. These patterns are not random malfunctions. They are precise responses to specific emotional environments. Think of a tree growing in harsh wind. It may bend in unusual ways, roots gripping tightly, trunk curved instead of straight. From a distance, someone might say the tree is misshapen, but up close you see intelligence in its form. It grew the only way it could to survive the conditions it faced. Human coping patterns are the same. They may look extreme or rigid later in life, but they once served a vital purpose: protection, belonging, emotional survival. The problem is that what helps a child survive can limit an adult's ability to thrive. The hyper-independent child becomes the adult who cannot ask for help, even when drowning. The emotionally numb child becomes the adult who struggles to feel joy or connection. The high achiever becomes the adult who never feels satisfied, always chasing the next proof of worth. The people pleaser becomes the adult who feels invisible in their own relationships. These patterns persist not because you are choosing misery, but because your nervous system still believes these strategies are necessary for safety. When you understand this, shame begins to soften. Instead of attacking yourself for being too sensitive, too needy, too driven, or too shut down, you can start to see these traits as younger parts of you still trying to help. They are outdated survival programs running in a present that is different from the past. And like any program, they can be updated, but not through self-criticism. They change through awareness, patience, and compassion. Self-judgment keeps the old patterns locked in place. When you tell yourself, I shouldn't be like this, you create more internal threat. The nervous system tightens further, and the coping strategy strengthens. But when you say, of course I learned to be this way, it helped me once, the system begins to relax. Compassion sends a signal of safety, and safety is what allows new responses to emerge. This does not mean excusing harmful behavior or avoiding responsibility. It means approaching change from understanding rather than condemnation. If someone snaps in anger easily, instead of labeling themselves as a bad person, they might explore how anger once protected them when they felt powerless. If someone avoids closeness, instead of calling themselves cold, they might recognize how distance once kept them from being hurt. Insight does not remove accountability. It makes growth possible. There is a profound difference between saying, this is just how I am, and saying, this is how I learned to be. The first feels fixed and hopeless. The second opens the door to transformation. Learning shapes these patterns, and new learning can reshape them. The brain and nervous system remain capable of change throughout life, especially when experiences of safety, honesty, and supportive connection begin to replace old expectations of rejection or overwhelm. Seeing yourself as adapted rather than damaged also restores dignity. You are not a collection of flaws to fix. You are a human being whose system did its best under pressure. That anxious part of you worked overtime to prevent danger. That perfectionist part tried to secure approval and stability. That numb part shielded you from pain that once felt unbearable. These parts deserve gratitude for their service, even as you gently teach them that their extreme roles are no longer required. From this perspective, healing is not about becoming someone entirely different. It is about loosening the grip of survival strategies, so more of your natural qualities can emerge. Curiosity, playfulness, creativity, tenderness, assertiveness, rest. These were never destroyed. They were simply overshadowed by the urgency to company. P. When the system feels safer, these qualities return on their own, like plants growing again after a long winter. You were never broken. You were shaped by experiences, just as every human is. The patterns you carry tell a story, not of defect, but of endurance. And when that story is met with understanding instead of shame, it stops being a life sentence and becomes the starting point for a different, more conscious way of living. Most of us were taught, directly or indirectly, that change happens through pressure. If you want to improve, be harder on yourself. If you make a mistake, criticize it quickly so you don't repeat it. If you struggle, push more, try more, demand more. We carry this harsh inner voice for decades, believing it is the engine of growth. Yet for many people, that voice does not create healing. It creates fear, tension, and a constant sense of not being enough. Real transformation rarely begins with force. It begins with understanding. When you look at your patterns through the lens of judgment, all you see are failures. Why am I so anxious? Why can't I say no? Why do I always sabotage things? Each question carries an accusation. The nervous system hears danger in that tone. And when the system feels attacked, it does not open up and change. It defends. You either double down on the pattern or shut down emotionally. Self-criticism might produce short bursts of performance, but it rarely produces deep, lasting healing. Compassion works differently. Compassion says, there is a reason I am like this. It assumes your struggles make sense in the context of your life, even if you don't fully understand that context yet. Instead of demanding immediate improvement, it creates space to explore, and space is where insight lives. Imagine responding to your own anxiety, not with frustration, but with curiosity. Instead of "what's wrong with me?" you gently ask, "when did I first start feeling I had to be on alert?" That question does not shame, it invites memory. It invites connection between present feelings and past experiences. You might begin to see how your anxiety once helped you anticipate unpredictability, stay prepared, avoid conflict. Suddenly, anxiety is no longer an enemy, it is a protector that has been working overtime. Or consider the habit of people-pleasing. The critical voice says, "You're weak, just say no." But compassion says, "Of course it's hard to say no." Once saying no may have meant disconnection, anger, or withdrawal of love. That understanding does not trap you in the behavior. It actually gives you the safety needed to change it. When you stop attacking yourself for struggling, the nervous system relaxes enough to try something new. Compassion does not mean self-pity or making excuses. It means recognizing your humanity. You are a person shaped by experiences, not a machine programmed to perform perfectly. When a friend comes to you in pain, you don't usually shout, "You should be better by now." You listen. You validate. You try to understand what they've been through. Healing yourself requires offering that same quality of presence inward. This shift can feel unfamiliar at first. If you grew up with criticism, neglect, or high expectations, kindness toward yourself may even feel wrong or indulgent. The inner critic often argues that without it, you will become lazy, careless, or selfish. But look closely. Has harshness truly brought you peace? Has it helped you feel worthy and at ease in your own skin? Or has it kept you in a cycle of striving and self-doubt? Research and lived experience both show that people are more likely to grow when they feel safe, not when they feel threatened. The brain learns best in an environment of support. The same is true for emotional healing. When you meet your mistakes with understanding, "I reacted that way because I was overwhelmed," you are more able to reflect and choose differently next time. When you meet them with shame, "I'm terrible for reacting that way," you are more likely to hide, deny, or repeat the pattern. Compassion also allows you to feel emotions you once avoided. Many people suppress grief, anger, or fear because those feelings were unwelcome earlier in life. A harsh inner voice keeps those emotions locked down. Stop being dramatic. Get over it. A compassionate voice says, "That hurt. No wonder you feel this way." In that gentle permission, tears may come or long-buried anger may surface. This is not regression, it is release. Feelings that are allowed to move tend to pass. Feelings that are judged tend to stay stuck. Another powerful aspect of compassion is that it restores choice. When you are caught in self-criticism, your behavior is often automatic, driven by old survival patterns. When you pause and respond with kindness, you create a moment of awareness. In that moment, you can ask, "What do I actually need right now?" Maybe you need rest instead of pushing through. Maybe you need to set a boundary instead of overcommitting. Maybe you need comfort instead of isolation. Compassion helps you hear those needs without drowning them out with demands. Over time, this gentler relationship with yourself becomes a foundation. You begin to trust your inner world rather than fight it. You become less afraid of your own emotions, less ashamed of your struggles, more patient with your pace of growth. Change still happens, but it happens in a way that is integrated, not forced. You are not dragging yourself forward with criticism, you are walking forward with understanding. The most profound shifts often come not from finally getting everything right, but from finally being on your own side. When you treat yourself as someone worthy of care, even in your most imperfect moments, you create the internal safety that many people were missing early in life. From that safety, new patterns can grow, not rooted in fear of being wrong, but in the steady knowledge that whatever arises, you will meet yourself with kindness rather than condemnation. One of the quietest yet most powerful beliefs many people carry is that their value must be proven, not once, but over and over again. Proven through productivity, through sacrifice, through being agreeable, through never causing trouble, through always being useful. It becomes an unspoken life rule. I am worthy if I succeed, if I help, if I am needed, if I don't disappoint anyone. The tragedy is that this belief often feels so normal, so responsible, that it goes unquestioned for decades. But worth is not something a human being is meant to earn. It is something we are meant to be born with. Watch a newborn child. No one asks what they have accomplished before holding them with tenderness. No one demands that be impressive before deciding they matter. Their value is obvious, unquestioned, inherent. Yet somewhere along the way, many of us drift far from that original truth. Love becomes tangled with performance. Attention comes more easily when we achieve or behave well. Approval feels conditional, and without anyone clearly stating it, we absorb the message. Who you are is not enough. You must become more. This belief fuels endless striving. The person who ties worth to achievement may never feel satisfied, no matter how much they accomplish. Each goal reached brings a brief sense of relief, quickly replaced by the pressure of the next target. Rest feels uncomfortable because doing nothing feels like being nothing. Their schedule stays full, their standards high, their inner critic relentless. From the outside, they may look driven and successful. Inside, they are often exhausted and quietly afraid of slowing down, because stillness brings them face to face with the fear that without constant output, they have no value. Others try to earn worth through self-sacrifice. They become indispensable in families, friendships, workplaces. They anticipate needs, solve problems, carry emotional burdens that are not theirs. Being needed feels like being secure. Over time, this pattern drains them. Resentment builds, though they may feel guilty even admitting it. They give and give, hoping that love will feel solid, yet often feeling unseen for who they truly are beyond what they provide. Some seek worth through perfection. Mistakes feel intolerable because errors threaten the fragile sense of being acceptable. They overanalyze, overprepare, overwork, trying to eliminate any flaw that could lead to criticism. Praise may come, but it rarely lands deeply. Compliments are brushed off, while small failures are replayed endlessly in the mind. Life becomes a performance review that never ends. Underneath all these patterns is the same wound, a disconnection from inherent worth. When worth is conditional, life becomes a constant evaluation. Every interaction is a test. Every failure feels like exposure. Every success feels temporary. There is little room for ease, play, or simple being. Reclaiming inherent worth does not mean abandoning growth, responsibility, or contribution. It means untangling your value from your output. It means recognizing that achievements can be expressions of your talents, not proof of your right to exist. You can still strive, but from inspiration rather than fear. You can still give, but from generosity rather than a desperate need to secure love. This shift often begins quietly, in moments of self-reflection. You might notice how uncomfortable it feels to rest without earning it. You might catch the inner voice that says, you should be doing more. Instead of obeying it automatically, you pause and question it. What if my worth does not rise and fall with my productivity? That question alone can feel radical. It can also be deeply emotional. When you start to let go of performance as your main source of value, you may come into contact with old grief. Grief for the times you felt you had to be impressive to be seen. Grief for the younger version of you who believed love had to be secured through effort. Allowing that grief is part of healing. It honors how hard you worked to survive emotionally in the only ways you knew. As you begin to sense your worth as something steady rather than fragile, relationships change. You feel less pressure to impress and more freedom to be honest. You can say no without feeling like you are failing as a person. You can receive care without immediately trying to repay it. Compliments can be taken in without suspicion. Criticism, while still uncomfortable, no longer feels like a verdict on your entire being. Living from inherent worth also softens how you see others. When you no longer measure your own value by constant comparison and performance, you feel less threatened by other people's success and less judgmental of their struggles. You recognize that every person carries the same basic value, regardless of status or achievement. This recognition deepens compassion and reduces the endless competition that keeps so many people locked in quiet insecurity. Perhaps the most freeing part of this shift is the permission to be human, to have off days, to make mistakes, to change your mind, to rest without guilt, to pursue joy not because it is productive, but because it is life-giving. Your existence does not need to be justified every morning. You do not wake up in debt to the world, required to prove you deserve your place in it. When worth is understood as inherent, not earned, life becomes less of a test and more of a journey. Effort becomes a choice, not a requirement for acceptance. And in that space you may discover a quieter, steadier confidence. Not the loud confidence of constant achievement, but the gentle knowing that who you are beneath all roles and performances has always been enough. For many people, the word no carries a weight far heavier than two small letters should hold. It can stir guilt, anxiety, even fear. The body tightens, the mind races with worst-case scenarios. They'll be upset. They'll think, I'm selfish. I'll disappoint them. I might lose the relationship. So instead of saying what is true, we say what is comfortable for others. We agree when we are exhausted. We smile when we feel overwhelmed. We stretch ourselves thinner and thinner, believing that keeping everyone happy is the same thing as being kind. But constantly overriding your own limits is not kindness. It is self-abandonment dressed up as virtue. Many of us learned early in life that harmony depended on us being easy. Maybe conflict in the home felt frightening, so we became peacekeepers. Maybe a parent reacted strongly to disagreement, so we learned to stay agreeable. Maybe our needs were minimized, so we stopped expressing them. Over time, we internalized the message, my feelings are less important than keeping others comfortable. Boundaries in that environment did not feel like healthy communication. They felt like threats to connection. So we grow into adults who equate saying no with hurting people. We believe that setting limits is rejection, that asking for space is selfish, that expressing discomfort is rude. We confuse being loved with being needed and being accepted with being compliant. And because we genuinely care about others, we keep giving, adjusting, and accommodating, often far beyond what is healthy. The problem is that when you consistently ignore your own boundaries, something inside you begins to protest. You may not even notice it at first. It can show up as irritability, resentment, emotional exhaustion, or a desire to withdraw. You might feel drained after interactions that looked perfectly pleasant on the surface. You might start avoiding people you care about, not because you don't love them, but because being with them has come to mean losing yourself. Unspoken boundaries do not create closeness. They create distance disguised as connection. True boundaries are not walls built to shut people out. They are clear lines that show others where you end and they begin. They are a way of saying, I want to stay connected to you, and I also want to stay connected to myself. Without boundaries, relationships are built on silent sacrifice. With boundaries, relationships have the chance to be built on honesty. Saying no does not mean you do not care. It means you are acknowledging your limits, your energy, your feelings. It is an act of respect for yourself and ultimately for the relationship. When you say yes while your whole body is saying no, your agreement is not genuine. It carries tension beneath it. That tension leaks out later as frustration, withdrawal, or passive anger. But when you say no with clarity and calm, you give the other person real information about you. You give them the opportunity to relate to the real you, not just the version that always accommodates. Of course, not everyone will like your boundaries. People who benefited from your overgiving may feel uncomfortable when you begin to change. They may call you selfish or distant. This does not automatically mean you are doing something wrong. It may simply mean the relationship was built on an imbalance that is now being corrected. Healthy relationships age us over time. They make room for both people's needs. Setting boundaries does not require harshness. It can be done with warmth and firmness at the same time. I can't help with that right now. I need some time to rest. That doesn't feel good for me. These are not attacks. They are expressions of self-awareness. The tone matters, but so does the willingness to tolerate the discomfort that can follow. because at first your nervous system may react as if you are in danger, even when you are simply being honest. That reaction is often an echo from the past, when asserting yourself did carry real risk. With practice, boundaries begin to feel less like threats and more like anchors. You start to notice how much lighter you feel when your yes is genuine and your no is respected. You experience relationships where you don't have to perform constant self-sacrifice to belong. You discover that the people who truly care about you want to know your limits, not just your availability. Perhaps most importantly, boundaries teach you that your feelings matter, your comfort matters, your energy matters. You stop treating yourself as an endless resource and start recognizing yourself as a human being with needs that deserve attention. This shift does not make you less loving. It makes your love more sustainable because it no longer requires you to disappear. In the end, boundaries are not about pushing others away. They are about standing in your own space with enough clarity that when you reach towards someone, you are doing it freely, not out of fear. And relationships built on that kind of freedom are not fragile. They are honest, balanced, and strong enough to hold the trust. Each of two people, not just the quiet sacrifice of one. There is a quiet myth that follows many people into midlife and beyond, a whisper that says, it's too late for me, too late to change old habits, too late to heal emotional wounds, too late to become the person you might have been under different circumstances. This belief can settle heavily in the heart, especially after decades of living a certain way. But it is a myth that deserves to be gently challenged, because human beings remain capable of growth, insight, and emotional renewal far longer than we are often led to believe. The idea that personality is fixed and healing has an expiration date comes more from discouragement than from truth. Yes, early experiences shape us deeply. Yes, patterns practiced for years can feel automatic. But the brain, the nervous system, and the heart are not frozen structures. They are living, adapting systems. Every time you have a new emotional experience, one of safety, honesty, connection, or self-understanding, you are, in a very real sense, updating the internal map you have carried since childhood. Many people spend the first half of their lives surviving, performing, building, enduring. Responsibilities are heavy. There is little time to reflect. You do what you must to keep going. Only later, sometimes in midlife or after a major life event, does space open for deeper questions. Who am I, really? Why do I keep repeating the same patterns? What do I actually feel? These questions are not signs that you have failed to figure life out earlier. They are signs that you are ready to look inward with a level of maturity and perspective you did not have before. Age can bring something precious to healing. Awareness. A younger person may still be too close to survival patterns to see them clearly. An older person can often look back and notice themes, how they always put others first, how they avoided conflict, how they chased achievement, how they shut down emotionally. This perspective is powerful. It allows you to recognize that your patterns have a history, and anything with a history can also have a future that looks different. Healing later in life does not require dramatic reinvention. It often begins with small, honest moments, admitting to yourself that you are tired of always being the strong one, noticing that you don't actually enjoy something you have done for years out of obligation, allowing yourself to feel sadness about the past instead of dismissing it with, that's just how it was. These moments may seem simple, but they represent a profound shift. You are turning toward yourself instead of away. It is also never too late to experience new kinds of relationships, including the relationship with yourself. A person in their 60s or 70s can still learn to express emotions more openly, to set boundaries, to ask for support. At first, it may feel awkward, even frightening, but each time you act in a way that is more aligned with your true feelings, you teach your nervous system that authenticity does not automatically lead to rejection. You gather new evidence that connection can survive honesty. Grief is often part of healing later in life. There may be sorrow for years spent disconnected, for dreams postponed, for needs unmet. Allowing that grief is not dwelling in the past, it is honoring your experience. And strangely, when grief is acknowledged, it often makes room for a new kind of freedom. You stop trying to pretend everything was fine, and in that honesty you reclaim energy that was tied up in denial. There is also deep wisdom that comes with age. You have seen life's unpredictability. You know that perfection is an illusion. You have likely faced loss, change, and disappointment. These experiences can soften rigid expectations and open the door to self-compassion. You may become less interested in impressing others and more interested in living truthfully. That shift alone can transform the quality of your remaining years. The nervous system responds to present experience, not just past history. When you practice slowing down, noticing your feelings, speaking your truth in small ways, and surrounding yourself with even one or two safe, supportive people, your system begins to register safety in the now. That safety allows old defenses to loosen. You may find yourself laughing more freely, resting without as much guilt, or feeling emotions that were once out of reach. These are not signs of becoming someone else. They are signs of returning to parts of yourself that were waiting patiently beneath layers of protection. No matter how many years you have lived, there is still a future ahead of you. Healing does not require erasing the past. It means changing your relationship with it so it no longer controls every present moment. Even small shifts in awareness, boundaries, self-talk, and emotional honesty can ripple outward, affecting relationships, health, and overall well-being. The human spirit has a remarkable capacity to renew itself when given understanding and care. Time does not disqualify you from that renewal. In many ways, it prepares you for it.